You know Paris syndrome, where Japanese people go to Paris and they expect it to be perfect, but it's full of homeless people and graffiti and they have a mental breakdown? I mean, this wasn't exactly like that, but it definitely reminds me of it. I was exactly where I wanted to be, taking the course I wanted, with a great class, doing cool assignments, but things still kept going wrong. First of all was the problem with Ivy. More and more our group was spending all its free time together. A group which consisted of 2 couples, myself, and a quiet but beautiful girl who I lost my chance with and was now dating a guy who seemed like a total wad. But he was never around, so whenever we went to a social gathering, I was put on Ivy duty, which was a real thing I actually had to do, which I probably should have hated but did not because it let me spend more time with her. Next was my job, where I was living the dream of being a college art kid working in a coffee shop, which, as it turns out, kind of sucks. Especially because most of the clientele at our location were snooty upper-class types, either genuine or self-deluded, and my health was suffering. As it turns out, putting in countless hours of work starts to take a toll on you. The schoolwork I so coveted was forcing me to stay hunched over a desk, straining my tendons and my back and depriving me of sleep. Trying to squeeze every usable hour out of a day meant rarely leaving your desk. Not leaving your desk meant not getting food, and the less I ate, the less I wanted to. I remember my mom coming home one day and asking if I'd even left my desk, and I realized I hadn't and that I'd gone over 12 hours without eating or even drinking, and I felt oddly proud of that. Slowly, over the school year, pushing my limits had become a sort of personal challenge. Everyone has character flaws, and I readily admit that one of mine is vanity. I'm thin. I like being thin. I never had to work at it, but at this point, it was slowly becoming a thought forever in the back of my mind. I was 6'2" and 145 pounds, and I was determined to keep it that way. In less than a year, I'd managed to give myself an eating disorder. As silly as that may sound, it's a reality that took me a long time to acknowledge. That was 15 years ago, and I still have problems with it. But even worse was the mental strain. For years, I'd had bouts of vertigo. Every 6 months or so, since I was 12 or 13, I'd get hit with an intense dizzy spell that would last for hours and take days to actually recover from. From my end, they look like this. You like this? I don't. It fucking sucks. I had an MRI, my inner ears were examined, I tried various anti-vertigo exercises, which of course did not work. I assumed this was some sort of bizarre problem I had and nothing could be done. The worry that one of these episodes could happen at almost any time lingered over me. But as I said, that was 15 years ago, and I have come to know my body much better. These were completely unknown to me, anxiety attacks. Now, everyone handles stress differently, and people who suffer from anxiety have it manifest in a variety of ways. Mine, it seemed, was a loss of equilibrium so severe that it left me immobilized for days on end, and they were getting worse and more frequent. And not knowing what was causing them was really making me nervous, which obviously didn't help. One day in class, Nigel was chastising me for not having any progress to show, and I had to tell him I was up all night seeking counsel about my problem. And he was like, well, you're getting a 0 for today. Like I fucking care. I'll take the goddamn 0. I'm talking about my health, man. And speaking of, there was the schoolwork. Half of the projects we did were great, and I absolutely saw how they'd be helpful in my career long term. Others, not so much. That weasel running our design class was no prince, as I've mentioned. Our computers class was half stuff I didn't care about and half stuff I couldn't understand. And then there was our media class. This class focused on us learning a variety of different forms of media. Right away, we didn't care too much since most of us either did our work on the computer or had a traditional media that we were just well-versed in and were going to stick with. A lot of our assignments were like, turn a historical figure into a cafeteria menu item, or buy a bunch of expensive Conte for this one assignment and then never use it again. And, frankly, none of us liked the teacher. So one day, we're all in class having a work period, just doing our thing, while Mr. Media Guy is walking around checking up on our progress, and the topic of conversation changes to vacations. But since no one liked this guy, they were all kind of ignoring him, but he locked eyes with me, so I was kind of stuck being polite and pretending to listen. And then he talks about how he loved going to Cape Cod because of how beautiful it is there, but you had to be careful because of how many child molesters there were there. I, understandably, am a little surprised by this change in tone, and I say I'd been to Cape Cod twice as a child with my family, and I never heard of any such thing. And he's like, oh yeah, there's a big community of child molesters there, just like in San Francisco. And no one else hears this. And I'm looking back and forth like, did that fucking happen? So I say, oh, because I'm not entirely sure what the fuck he's talking about, and I don't want to read too much into it. So I go home and I'm having dinner with my mom, and I tell her about what happened at school, and she's like, oh my God, David, he's talking about gays. You see, I did not know that Cape Cod was a known super gay hangout, but that made the comment about San Francisco make a lot more sense. Now I can already hear you typing up comments and asking why I wasn't going to the dean and demanding his resignation, but remember, this was a long time ago, and I was still willing to give him the benefit of the doubt that maybe it was a weird joke that didn't land or something like that. But really, more than anything, I was impressed. Can you imagine going to an art school, of all places, and saying openly to a room of art students that gay communities are riddled with child molesters? This guy may have had a tiny brain, but he had huge nuts. As it turns out, he was also a hardcore fundamentalist, which I didn't know at the time, and while I do not believe in trying to get people fired over their religious or political beliefs for any reason, fortunately, he was also a lousy teacher, and we were happy to hear he was invited to not return the following semester. I was having problems with my friends, my job, my teachers, my home, my heart, my head, my brain. But the worst part is that I was too busy to really enjoy being there. Every day I'd go to the lab and I felt like I was part of something and that we could take on the world. It's not like I was trying to sabotage myself, but I really should have taken more time to appreciate the good times. This was no utopia. Nothing ever can be. But it was what I asked for. I just wish I'd made more of it.